Woo. Thank you. Well, it's indeed an honor to be here. Unfortunately, when President Clinton dedicated this, I recall the weather was so awful I couldn't even make it in. I remember that it was so terrible. And so I finally get to come back here, and I got a tour of the Clinton Library, which was very interesting today. And here we are. I'm being hosted by the Clinton, what are you, School of Government, or what, is that what it is, School of Public Service? I live in Mexico now for half the year, and before I move on to what I'll talk about and take questions, I'm going to make a statement, and I'm going to, as usual, I guess, shock people. Maybe that's my job. But there's a referendum coming to the state of California this fall that I think is exceptionally important. And what that referendum is the full legalization of marijuana. And I urge you, if you know anyone in California, urge them to vote yes on this issue. And it's not just so hippies can get high. The carnage, I live in Mexico now, I live 800 miles across the border, so I'm way down and I'm not affected. But I drive it every year. And the borders now, the carnage going on because of this, quote, war on drugs. There's 17,000 people have been killed just in the last year. I mean, that's worse than our wars. So this is a war going on in our neighboring country that is our fault. It's our fault. Now you might say, why? Well, because these border towns were created by us. They were created way back when somebody in this country got the bright idea to ban alcohol. And we all know, for those few of you that are here that are old enough to remember that, I learned about it from my mother and father. And my mother, before she passed on, said to me, this war on drugs is identical to the prohibition of alcohol. The only thing that happens is that criminals get rich and powerful. Because, you know, if you prohibit something, it doesn't mean it's going away. It just means it's going to be run by a criminal element now, and you're going to make them rich. And that's exactly what is happening here. So I urge you, let's decriminalize the drugs, and that will put the cartels out of business. It's the only way it can be done. You cannot fight it on the supply side. It must be fought on the demand side. And who demands all the drugs? We do. That's why they're being run in here. So as long as we have a demand in this country, there will be a supply. And it's just like this, put up the walls at the border. Oh, I like that one. You know, we're gonna stop them. I got news for you, people. You can put up a 40-foot wall and I'll show you someone with a 41-foot ladder. And not only that, but I get a laugh out of that because I think back in our history, and I remember I saw a sign during the border disputes of the illegal aliens, I guess as we call them. And I remember the sign said, the Pilgrims didn't have visas. And I thought, isn't that interesting? We come here, we kill all the Native Americans, steal their land, but by God, now if you're gonna be here, you better have some damn paperwork. You know, you better get some papers or you're not gonna be here. And on the other side, do you people realize that if we stop the immigrants coming across the border, that the entire agricultural industry of California will collapse? Which in turn, if we stop it also, the entire economic of Mexico will collapse. Why would we want to collapse two complete economies? I don't get that. Well, for what reason? Because people, my view is this, I live down in Mexico now, so here's my shot. I've lived the American dream. When I got out of the United States Navy and went to start my wrestling career, I had $250 and a beat-up Chevy. So I've had that opportunity to be where I am today. through hard work, through living the American dream. My belief is now, if two of these people from Mexico want to come up here and take me and my wife's spot, they're welcome to it. I'll go down there because I like their weather better. And I'm fortunate now I don't have to chase the American dream anymore. And so I made a conscious decision to live in Mexico. Now people say, Governor, what do you do in Mexico all day? What do you do down there? Because you got to know where I live. I live down the Baja, 800 miles. And I live an hour from pavement and an hour from electricity. There is no electricity where I live. People say to me, what do you do down there? I said, it's simple. I said, I wake up every morning with nothing to do, and when I go to bed at night, I'm half done. But that's a choice I made, you know. Now I do have electricity. My house is completely solar. I live off the sun. And it's a unique thing to do that, because you'd be surprised how conscious that you become of using energy then. When you're not in a room, you turn the lights off. When you're not using something, you shut it off, which we've become so wasteful up here. How many people know that when you take your remote on your TV and you shut it off, did you know that TV is still burning a half an amp 24/7? So if you've got 4 TVs in your house and you merely shut them off with the remotes, you're still burning 2 amps of energy whether you're there while you're at work. Now, what's the way to do it? Don't disconnect your satellite, because that doesn't burn hardly nothing. But get one of those bars. You've all seen those bars. You can get one of those, shut that off to your TV alone. Then when you come in the house and you want to watch TV, flip the switch. By the time you get seated down and hit your remote, it'll be on. Because the only reason that we do that is so we get instant picture. Well, you're not going to miss the Razorback play or anything if you're watching Arkansas play. You know, you might miss half the play. You'll still see the end of it. But get those electric bars, because my solar guy down there told me if everyone in the United States and Canada would merely unplug their TVs when they weren't watching them, we would have more energy than we know what to do with. Because think of it, there's probably 1 billion TVs in the United States and Canada, and they're all burning a half an amp when they're off. So you got 500,000 amps being burned when the TVs aren't even on. That's wasteful, and especially in a time in our lives like now. Now, we'll get to the book. He covered the background and all that, and thank goodness you don't know everything. What do you think you don't know about me? I'm not a politician. No. Here's the definition. You know what a politician is? A politician is someone who gets elected year after year after year and makes getting elected a career. I am a statesman. A statesman gets elected, and then when he finishes, he goes back to what he used to do. Imagine that concept today. Imagine that. I remember there was another independent governor, you know, when I was in, Angus King of Maine. He was on his second term, but he didn't get the press that I did because he didn't wrestle, but a brilliant man. And I'll always remember when Angus got out after 8 years as governor of Maine, the Maine press said, well, what's next, Governor King? Congress, the Senate? And Angus looked at him and said, no, I'm going home. I'd spent 8 years. I've fallen behind. I've got things to catch up on in my private life and my house. Imagine that. Go home. And that's why, you know, that's where I come from. So I'm a statesman. Now, you want to know what you don't know about me. Well, maybe this was my first foray into politics. When I was in my last year in the Navy after 2 tours overseas, I liked to ride Harley Davidsons. I became third in command of what today is the most terrifying motorcycle club in America. And it ain't the Hells Angels. We're the ones that went to war with them, and they couldn't beat us, the Mongols. Imagine that. Well, we all got our sordid past, but I don't run from it. It seemed like the right thing to do at the time, and it was a lot of fun. And I just got out of the service, and I was single, and I thought, what's being an outlaw biker like? Let's find out. Because that's how I've lived my life. I've lived my life that when I get ready to go, I don't want to have to sit and say woulda, coulda, shoulda. I don't want to face that. I want to try everything I can, experience everything I can, and that way when I leave this planet, I'll be satisfied that I've done all. That's why I'm on the adventure now to Mexico. I felt that I was still young enough to go on an adventure, and that window's closing though. I'm 58 years old now, and so that's the reason I went down there. But now let's move on to the book. That's, I guess, why we're here pretty much. When they first approached me with this book, I turned them down. Like all writers, I guess now on my 4th national bestseller, we just learned. This book's number 6. And without even being reviewed by any major paper, because they won't touch it with a 10-foot pole because, but again, we don't practice censorship in our country, do we? But yet my book, no one will review it. They won't talk about it. They're trying to poo-poo it. But so this is my 4th one. One of the things I'm most proud of is I'm a professor from Harvard now, and I only went to high school, only in America. Only in America. Imagine that. I am a professor. I carry the ID from Harvard University. Yes, he went to Harvard. And so I'm proud of that because only in this country. And where did I teach? I taught at the John F. Kennedy School of Government at Harvard. And what did I teach? Third-party politics. And and in fact, Eleanor Cliff was there one day, the newspaper lady, blonde, you all know Eleanor Cliff, I think. And she had the office for one day opposite mine, and there was this constant, my office kids, one after the other for 8 hours, because that's what you do, is make yourself available. And so Eleanor wrote an article about me, and I really liked what she called me. She gave me the title of the high priest of the third party movement. That's kind of a cool name. I like that, the high, so you can refer to me now as the high priest of the third party movement who teaches at Harvard. But but I enjoyed my time out there because I never got the chance to go to college. Well, I had the chance, but rather at 18, I enlisted in the United States Navy. And lo and behold, I was deceived by a conspiracy right there, because I learned it at Harvard in 2004. Robert McNamara came through. And Robert McNamara has now admitted that the Gulf of Tonkin incident never happened. Now that was the catalyst that put ground troops and put us fully into the Vietnam War, and it was done over something that didn't happen. Anything sound familiar about that? Anybody make a connection to more modern day about something that wasn't true and didn't happen and we went to war? Hey. So, in light of that fact, and I look at it, and when people say to me, well, how can you claim a conspiracy on 9/11? Who would kill 3,000 people without thinking about it? Barbara Wawa hit me with that hard on The View. Barbara Walters, I like to refer to her like Gilda Radner used to, Baba Wawa. And I almost called her that day there too. But I didn't think the mood she was in, she would have appreciated the humor. But anyway, though, I looked at her and said, well, excuse me, what about the Gulf of Tonkin incident where they lied to us? 58,000 of my generation were killed in that war. Probably, who knows, 1 million Vietnamese were killed in that war, all over something that never happened. See, I'm setting the stage for the book, because they approached me to do this book, and like I said, I turned it down initially, but then I thought about it for 2 weeks. And then it came to me that I had to write this book. And I felt I had to write this book because I don't want 100 years from now for people to look back at, say, this 50 or 75 years or whatever I'm on the planet. I don't want them to think that all of us bought in. I don't want them to think that there wasn't a great deal of evidence that led to another conclusion. I want people to understand that because it disturbs me today. We start in the book, we go all the way back to Abraham Lincoln. And the reason we did that was to set up what they do, the lone nut assassin. Now, I was never taught in school, and I'm sure there's a few of you here that didn't know. John Wilkes Booth did not act alone. There were 8 people tried and convicted with him, 4 of them sentenced to death. The actual assassination was going to include President Lincoln, President Johnson, Secretary of State Seward, as well as General Ulysses Grant. They were only successful on 1, but 8 people were prosecuted, 4 put to death, including the first woman put to death. I think that's a pretty historical event, don't you? But yet, I wasn't taught that in school. It stopped at John Wilkes Booth. And they're still not teaching it, at least not in Minnesota public schools, because my little nephew's 15. And I quizzed him a few months ago. I said, what have you learned about the assassination of Abraham Lincoln? And he beamed up. He said, we just had that a couple weeks ago. So it was fresh in his mind. He, in essence, relayed the same story to me. John Wilkes Booth came up behind him at the Ford Theater, shot him in the back of the head, yelled something, leaped to the floor, hurt his leg. They chased him to a barn, lit it on fire, and killed him. Nothing about 8 other people being involved. Nothing about the conviction of all of them and 4 put to death, including the first woman. Nothing. Why? Well, I think I know why. But again, I'm only speculating. Notice how every political assassin, you learn all 3 names. John Wilkes Booth, Lee Harvey Oswald, James Earl Ray, Mark David Chapman. You go down the list. Now I ask you, what's Charles Manson's middle name? Anyone? Look at this, the most notorious murderer in the annals of modern day time in America. And you don't know his middle name? Well, because the media doesn't tell it to you like they do a political assassin. And I believe that's a little psychological ploy used to get you to think lone nut, lone nut. How could all these murders be done? They never talked to a soul. These people that were failures at everything they did in life. But yet when it came time to kill a prominent political leader, my God, they're the best you can be. You know, never did anything else any good, never were successful at anything, but when it came time to bump off one of our leaders, be it civil rights, be it a president, be it whoever, and the one chapter I wish I would have included, the murder of John Lennon of the Beatles. Because, I read a thing on that. I got into that after this was finished. Now, question, what do the murder of John Lennon, Dr. Martin Luther King, and Malcolm X all have in common? Anyone? They were all under government surveillance at the time they were killed. Notice in all these conspiracies, the one common denominator of the conspiracy is the government. The government. Now, I guess mainstream media tell you, well, that's just the roll of the dice, or whatever. But all run. Now, under government surveillance, wouldn't you think that if they had them under surveillance like that, they could probably have prevented one of the murders? Or were they like us Navy SEALs, where you put the target under surveillance so that you can learn everything you can possibly educate yourself on the target so that you can pick the most opportune time to hit the target and be successful? That's the flip side of it. That's what we do in our business. So the book is controversial, no doubt about it. I guess I will tell you that nothing in the book is made up. I'm not Vince Flynn. I'm not Tom Clancy. I'm not here to write a fabulous espionage tale with my imagination. If you look in the back of the book, you'll see about 20-some pages of notes. They're all numbered. They will tell you where the information came from. I give kudos to my co-writer, Dick Russell. It's the second book we've collaborated on, and Dick is one of these guys that can research. And without him, this book wouldn't be done. And because he did the yeoman's research on it. All I had to do was read his research and then put the puzzle together from there. And that's what this is like. I don't know if I told you this. It's like throwing a jigsaw puzzle on the floor. And each bit of that puzzle is a scrap of information. And you start to assemble these scraps. Now, can you complete the whole puzzle? Absolutely not. In most cases, too much time, too much evidence destroyed, whatever it is. But if you're persistent, you can create the puzzle to the point, like all jigsaw puzzles. You can kind of figure out what the picture is, right? So that's what went into the book. We cover 14 different conspiracies, including the one we're not allowed to talk about, you're not allowed to question. You're called unpatriotic if you do. You're called un-American if you do. I think Shakespeare said something about they doth protest too much. And that, of course, is 9/11. Now, I believe 9/11 when it initially happened. I don't so much today. I know what happened, but I don't believe fully what we've been told is the truth on it. And I'll give it to you like this, a couple of things to think about. We're a country with the rule of law, correct? Or at least we should be. Now, how do you convict someone before you indict them? Now, what is an indictment? You don't have to have anyone in custody to get an indictment. An indictment is the government's way to go to a grand jury, which is a group like us, a group of citizens. They present enough evidence to where that group of citizens says, you know, there's enough meat on this bone that we will bring an indictment for whatever the crime is. Why hasn't bin Laden been indicted? We've had 9 years. Why hasn't the government come forward with any real evidence other than just telling us he did it? Because that's all they really did. They just told us, and then they showed you these 19 pictures within 24 hours. Wasn't that amazing? They knew who did it all, but yet they couldn't do a thing to stop them. And yet within 24 hours, we knew who they all were. Pretty good work there. But think about it. Why hasn't he been indicted? Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, the guy they won't try in open court. Why? Because they have to present evidence then? And trust me, this guy confessed, right? Right? Well, yes he did, but he got waterboarded 180 times. And I'm here to tell you, I have been waterboarded. I know what waterboarding is. It is torture, and if they waterboarded every one of you 180 times, you would be confessing too. Why do you think we don't allow torture with our police and that? Because you can't believe the confession. The person being tortured will say whatever it is to stop the torture. And I'm not saying this guy's innocent now, I don't know. But there's just a lot of strange things that are not happening. And whenever the government varies from standard operating procedure, then watch out, because normally governments always operate in a standard way. And when all of a sudden they throw out some standard and loop it, well then you got to be wary that what they're doing is not true. And always remember, people, Remember back to the Gulf of Tonkin incident. It was made up. Was this one too in its own way to get us to go to war? A lot of people make a lot of money off war. Always remember that. There are profiteers at war, people that make huge amounts of money. I'd like to know how much Halliburton's made. You know? Oh, by the way, my quote, apparently Yale University has, every year they do the top 10 quotes, and I made it last year. So now I'm in infamy. It's at Yale, and they put it in stone or whatever they do there. And my quote was this. I said it on Larry King. I said, you give me Dick Cheney 1 hour in a waterboard, and I'll have him confess to the Sharon Tate murders. And I say that seriously because, well, actually that was an untrue statement. I'll confess it was an untrue statement. You know why? Cheney's got a bad ticker. He could never last 1 hour on a waterboard. He'd be deader than a doornail, you know, if you did that to him. But I get angry. Now, let's get to modern here, politics a little bit. What is wrong with President Obama? He is the greatest speaker in my lifetime since John Kennedy. I mean, this guy can inspire you. This guy is tremendous. Now it's time to stop talking and start doing. You know, the talk's over now. Start doing. And the first thing he should be doing is, how about restoring, I couldn't believe they reissued the Patriot Act. Now, why that, and when are they going to restore the Fourth Amendment to the Bill of Rights? Illegal search and seizure. Do you realize every email and every phone call you make has the potential today to be monitored by the government? Now, I've had people say, but I want that. That keeps me safe. I'll tell you something. I'd rather face any terrorist head on 365 days a week than I would to lose our freedoms. Freedoms come first, ladies and gentlemen. And whenever the government tells you they're going to keep you safe, get ready, you're going to lose your freedom. I remember George Bush saying, they attacked us because they're jealous of our freedoms. Remember that? So our response is, well, we're going to take away your freedoms, then they won't be jealous anymore, and lo and behold, look, we haven't been attacked anymore. It must work. Because we've certainly lost some of our freedoms, and they're probably not jealous now. How many people bought that explanation? Nobody. Good. Now, President Obama, when is he going to restore, and I'm getting one of them mental blocks here, help me, the thing with law. Habeas corpus, thank you. You know, you get those blocks every now and then with them funny words. I never went to law school, so. Although Alan Dershowitz, I did attend his law school at Harvard, and I answered, he didn't know it was me, and I answered a question, and I got a very good. At Harvard Law School, and I only went to high school. I'll tell you that when we're done after habeas corpus. It's a funny story. But when is the president going to reestablish habeas corpus that we've lost now? Do you realize that because of the Patriot Act, each and every one of you could be arrested, held indefinitely, not be charged, and not be allowed to see a lawyer? And we ain't talking Guantanamo here. We're talking all they have to do is say the crime you committed had some sort of connection to terrorism. And they now can arrest you, keep you in custody, not provide you with a lawyer, and not even charge you and hold you indefinitely. Anybody here as upset as I am over that type of behavior that's supposed to be in home of the brave, land of the free? And so I plead with President Obama, come on, restore our freedoms again. Give them back. But then again, of course, if we get our freedoms back, there's a likelihood we could get attacked because they're jealous of our freedoms, you know? So anyway, though, what was I going to talk to you about again? What's that? Oh, Dershowitz. Yeah, there we go. I go out to Harvard as a visiting professor, and of course one of the good things you can do is audit any class you want, so you can get literally a free Harvard education, you just don't get graded. Well, who the hell needs a grade? It's all about what stays in here anyway. I don't need a grade at this point in my life. So I told the kids that were my assistant, they assign you these young Harvard students to get you around campus, make sure everything's cool for you and all that. And I said, find out when Dershowitz teaches. I want to go down, and I've always enjoyed him, and he's a brilliant man. I want to sit in on his Harvard Law School classes. So at the time I had grown, I remember I had shaved head as governor. Well, by this point, when I knew I was going to Harvard for 5 months, I started to let my hair grow out, and I grew a full beard. Because don't all professors have full beards? And then I even put those things on my sport jackets, those, whatever the hell those things are, but you always see professors with them. So I figured, I needed the right wardrobe here if I'm gonna pull this off. So I got my whole get up and all that, and I'm out there at Harvard, and I go to Dershowitz's class. Now, bear in mind, I got a full beard now, so he don't recognize me. And he told me after class, he said, Governor, I had no idea that was you till you spoke. See, I'm always betrayed by the freaking voice. I can't get away from that. But, so I'm in the class, and here's what Professor Dershowitz posed as the question. Now, remember, this is criminal law. He said, can a husband rape a wife? Because first of all, when there's a marriage, that's a contract. And in that contract will be sex. That's part of the deal if you get married, right? Now, just because one partner doesn't want to have sex and the other partner does, there's your dilemma. There's your dilemma. Can a husband rape a wife? And none of the other students responded, so I raised my hand, and Professor Dershowitz called on me, and I said, Professor, in light of the fact, here's my belief. I said, in light of the fact that we do not deem rape a sexual act, but an act of violence, I would have to say that the answer to that question is yes, because you're not allowed to hit your wife. That's an assault. And since we deem rape not a sexual act, but an act of violence, therefore, yes, a husband could be charged with raping his wife. Dershowitz pointed and went, very good. And I kind of sat back and thought, hell, who needs college to go to Harvard Law School? I never went to college, and here I am getting very goods from Alan Dershowitz. I'll get my law degree and I won't even have a regular degree. I don't know if they do that or not, but I think it's a case of me, I'm the guy with street smarts. That's where I've learned most of my life, is out on the street, a reality check, if you want to call it that. Which brings me to, I'll open for questions now, but which brings me to the fact that always remember, that's one of the reasons why I have a difficult time in government, is because I enter government with something called common sense. And when you deal with government, most of the time you can toss common sense right out the window. So the other thing I'll tell you too, just so you understand, about my election in Minnesota for a moment. The media doesn't like to talk about it much, and I think there's a reason. They don't want any more of me showing up. For varied reasons. First of all, I only raised $300,000 to become the governor of Minnesota. That's all the money I raised. And the reason for that was when I was a teenager, my father, who had an 8th grade education, and by the way, if anyone questions my patriotism, my father had 6 bronze battle stars in World War II. My mother was a nurse in North Africa and a World War II veteran. My brother and I are both Vietnam veterans. So I always look at him and say, we don't just talk the talk, we also walk the walk. So no one dare question my family's patriotism when every member of your immediate family served at a time of war. But anyway, now where the hell was I going? It's been a long, hey, you got to bear in mind, I've been on a press junket now for this book for 2 weeks, 6 in the morning until 10 at night every day, doing more interviews, having to face Baba Wawa and let's have fun though. The tough guys at Fox, they won't let me on. I call them the Three Stooges. You know, you got Larry, that's O'Reilly. You got Moe, that's Hannity with that haircut. And then, of course, we all know who Curly is, Glenn Beck. I mean, if that's not Curly's illegitimate son, I don't know who is. You know, take a look at him close and then put Curly Howard right next to him. And I think you'll find that Glenn Beck and Curly Howard have got to be related somewhere along the line. You know, there's got to be something there. But, you know, them cowards won't have me on. Won't have me on yet. You notice they'll attack me. They'll call me names. Oh, they're tough. You know, they're tough guys. They can do it when I'm not there. Well, one of the reasons maybe why they won't let me on, I'll give you a backstory. I used to be able to get on with Hannity. And the first time, I won't do Fox unless it's in person. I won't do them over a satellite. That gives them false courage. Much better to be there, looking them eye to eye. And first time I did Hannity, I wasn't on yet, and they took a break, and he's up there, and Governor, he greets me. I said, hey, Sean, I said, and I don't really overly like to brag, but I said, Sean, you know that I was a Navy SEAL, right? And he goes, oh yeah, and then he goes into this, thank you for your service to the country, blah, 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 which, you know, had about as much, you know, come on. The guy's gonna say that to whether the guy peeled potatoes and was in the brig his whole life, you know, as long as he was in the service. But when he was done, I said, Sean, I said, I appreciate everything you've said, but there's another reason that I said that to you. And I was dead serious, and I just stared him down hard, eye to eye. And he goes, really? What was that? And I said, Sean, I just want you to know one thing. And he goes, what? I said, you gotta sleep sometime. And I just looked, that's all I said, and I just glared at him. You gotta sleep sometime, Sean. So, Sean's always treated me pretty good. You know, at least off the air for sure, you know. Introduced me to his son the next time I was there and all that. But anyway, that's how I deal with those guys. And so I think now it'd be better. Nothing's off limits. I want to tell you this finally too. In my campaign for governor, I never used one prepared speech. Not a one. Now, when I became governor, I continued with that tradition except for the state of the state. Because when you do the state of the state, you can't even begin to make a little mistake or they'll bury you. So you got to go off the teleprompter and all that. But, you know, I feel good right now with our current president. You know why? At least he can read a teleprompter. You know, this current president, he can read one. The guy before, I wasn't too sure about it. And then I'm going to have some fun with you too, you know. I watched a tape the other day of George Carlin. Gee, we need him back. We need George Carlin. We lost a great voice when George passed, but I had to laugh. He was doing a thing on God. And he talked about that he worships the sun. And he said, why? It comes up every morning. I can see it. It gives me great credibility. But he said he worships the sun, but he prays to Joe Pesci. And he said, because Joe Pesci just looks like the kind of guy that can get things done. And he said, it's amazing what Joe can do. Joe and an old-fashioned baseball bat. So anyway, thank you very, very much. I'll open for questions right now.
Let's wait till I recognize you and get the microphone over to you. Right here, we'll go right here. Yes, sir. Wait for the microphone, please.
Governor,
Yes.
who did shoot JFK?
Well, we'll never know the shooters. You know, I don't believe so. But I believe that John F. Kennedy was killed because Vietnam was going to be Cuba. And he wouldn't support the Bay of Pigs invasion with our military. And so then they made the shift to Vietnam rather than Cuba. And I believe Kennedy was killed because he had action memo, I think 273 or something like that, where he was actually going to begin pulling us out by that Christmas, and we were going to be completely out of Vietnam by 65. Let's remember something, people. There are profiteers at war, people that make big money. And you had the Bell helicopter who was ready to go under in bankruptcy, and all of a sudden they found the ability to make 50,000 helicopters that would get knocked out of the air in Vietnam that they could keep replacing them with, and it would make our economy great, wouldn't it? So what if a few people die, right? I think he was killed over the fact that he wouldn't go to, that Kennedy was, and plus he was already gotten détente with Khrushchev, and many things. I think John Kennedy stood too much for peace, to be very blunt and simple to you. And there were people at that point in time that weren't going to have none of that, and I believe that's why he was killed. Can I say who did it? Absolutely, I don't know. And I don't think we'll ever know. But how many people believe Oswald acted alone? Seriously, I won't ridicule you. How many people here believe that Oswald was a lone nut assassin? 1, 2, 3. Guess who's the minority? And yet, and you're entitled to your opinion. But the point is, since you're that small of a minority, why should we get slammed if we believe the opposite you do? But yet we do. We're called conspiracy theorists. Well, the government is a conspiracy theorist too. They haven't proved anything, and don't tell me the Warren Commission provided proof, or the 9/11 Commission, either one of them. I believe those commissions are done not to seek the truth, but to cover it up. Look at how they operate. They operate with the answer already. Well, anybody that goes to college knows you can't go that way. You have to take the evidence and allow the evidence to lead you to the answer. What these commissions do, they already know the answer, so therefore they only accept any evidence that gives them their preconceived conclusion. Anyone that's I haven't been to college, so I'll ask you, is that the way they teach you to do research in college, those of you that have gone? No. You're supposed to look at the evidence and then find your conclusion. But these commissions are the direct opposite. Next question.
All right, let's go right here, sir.
Thank you, Governor, for coming to Little Rock. When are we going to get you, Art Bell, George Norrie, Michael Savage, Neil Bort, and Chuck Harder in front of one radio microphone and explain to the world what's going on, the truth about 9/11? Thank you.
Thank you. Me, I don't know. Like I said, I'd rather be surfing in Mexico. By the way, I'll tell you did I tell you the story about when I was playing golf? I was playing golf, and of course I'm not privy. It took me 5 days to learn about the earthquake in Haiti. That's how secluded I was. I didn't even learn of it till 5 days after it happened. Well, I was on the golf course, and the ranger came up and said, "Governor, have you heard what happened?" I said, "What?" He said, there was just an earthquake, 8.5 or whatever in Chile. And he said, "There's a tsunami heading here. It's supposed to hit her at 5:40. I said, 5:40 this afternoon? He goes, "Yeah." Well, now my wife, my dog, and my cat, we live right on the beach. So I ended my golf game immediately. I jumped in my truck. I had an hour and a half drive home, hoping to get there. I would beat it by an hour or so, right? So I tear all the way home down the Mexican dirt road. I'm over the top of the big mountain. I'm hurrying home as fast as you can on this road. I whip into my house. I jump out. I run into the house. I grab my surfboard and head immediately to the beach. And I stood there waiting. I'm going, man, I ain't never surfed a tsunami. Here's one for the books. This is one that now I can say, I've surfed a tsunami. And the water started to withdraw, and my heart started pounding a little bit, going, here it comes. But I kept looking, and I didn't see anything. And the next thing, the water comes back in 1 foot higher. Now, I'm happy that it wasn't a real big tsunami that would cause, thousands of people to be homeless and die. But what the heck, we could have at least had, say, an 8 or 9 foot wave. As a surfer, That's not asking for too much, is it? So anyway, there's the fun story about
That's
me and the
beautiful.
tsunami.
Right here, here's a question right here.
Okay, I'll let you pick them out. You can,
I would like to ask you, there's a lot of historians out there. Have they ever refuted any of your claims in the book?
have they ever refuted any of my claims? Well, I'm sure they'd refute all of them. But again, this book is not based on my imagination. You'll see the footnotes. And all we did was look at evidence and then take it and attempted to take it to some type of conclusion of what would the picture be if this evidence really and truly is what it is. And again, the common denominator of all 14 chapters is the government. They're the one that's involved in every one of them pretty much. And I did the first 2 chapters. How many people know that there was a coup d'etat attempted against FDR? Well, what's interesting, you know why they did it? They were coming out of the Great Depression and they thought he was too socialist. Does that sound, anybody ring a bell here about things we're hearing right now? And I'll say this about health care, everyone. I don't know what's in the bill. I've been in Mexico. You think I'm going to read that damn thing? So I'll be honest with you, but I look at it from a very perspective of this. Shouldn't everyone be able to go to the doctor if you're sick? It's as simple as that. To me, it's a human rights issue. Everyone should be allowed to go to the doctor. Now, if there's bad things in this bill, well, pass the thing, let's see what's bad and amend it. That's why you do it. They can come back a year later and say, okay, this sucks, this is good, this sucks, this is good. Remove the stuff that's bad and add the stuff that's good. But we're the only industrialized nation in the world that doesn't provide health care for our citizens. But we do actually, because I was on with Michelle Bachmann the other night and she said, Governor, that's not true, everyone can get health care. Yes, we can, if you go to the emergency room, which adds, we got any nurses here? Oh, there's a few. How much more expensive is it to go to the emergency room than to see the doctor in his office? 75 to 80% more expensive to go to the emergency room than to see the doctor in his office. Now, if my Roosevelt High School math is correct, that means we would what? Save money? There's the possibility to save money there? And to me, then you get the guys that are worried about, again, the illegal aliens. So in other words, I laughed the other day because did you know Hawaii has had state-run health care for 40 years, the state of Hawaii? And I saw a great interview with Dog the Bounty Hunter. How many know Dog, the old bounty hunter? And Dog apparently got in a scuffle and caught one in the mouth and was bleeding pretty good in the mouth, and he made the statement, gee, if this would have happened in the 48 states, I'd have gone to the hospital and they would have asked to see my wallet and I would have had to say my wallet doesn't hurt, my lip does. But see, in our 48, they got to see the wallet first before they treat what's hurting. And yet they've had a government-run health care in Hawaii for 40 years now, and let me give it to you in this aspect. If it's true that government-run health care is so bad, then why have we subjected our veterans to it since World War I? Are we screwing the vets over again, giving them inadequate health care? Or, on the flip side, if it's good enough for a veteran, shouldn't it be good enough for you? Well, you can't even bring them up. Come on. How dare you? Think you could bring up that the Congress takes care of themselves? Did you know now they get raises without even voting? They passed a thing a few years ago where every so often they get an automatic raise. They don't even have to be accountable and vote on it. It's permanent. Every so often. So here's your example. We're fighting our way through these huge recessions, but our congressmen and that are getting raises automatically. Not even having to vote on it, automatically. I got the answer for you, people. Stop voting for Democrats and Republicans. And Remember this, when they tell you if you vote for someone other than a Democrat or Republican, they're going to tell you you wasted your vote. Do you know what happened in Minnesota when I won? There were people wearing T-shirts all over the state that said, I was one of those wasted votes when Jesse Ventura won. Remember this, you know what a wasted vote is? A wasted vote is not voting your heart and your conscience. Then you've wasted your vote. And remember too that an election is not a horse race. You're not voting to pick a winner. You're voting to pick the candidate that most represents the ideals that you have. And if that candidate finishes fifth, so what? You voted your heart and your conscience. That's not a wasted vote. I haven't voted for a Democrat or Republican in my whole adult life. I voted for John Anderson. How many remember him back in '84? Oh yeah. I got on quick that I realized these parties are not the solution, they're the problem. And we were warned about them by Jefferson, Washington, and John Adams. They said the fall of America would not come from an outside entity, it would come internally when political parties take control of the government. Excuse me, where are we at? And let me add this final, and we'll go. And you know that they put their party before their country because watch their votes. They vote for their party first, the country second.
Yes, sir, right here. Right, no, in the front, yeah, yes.
Yes, I appreciate you coming down, and I followed you since you and Hulk Hogan were supposed to have that championship match back several years ago.
Never had it, though.
It never happened. But I just want to ask you a question, and it may be in your opinion, but how is it possible, and you being a Navy SEAL, that any person can evade being captured by the full force of the United States for this many years?
Well, I'll give you the one, okay, I'll give you the reason they can't get captured. I just read a book by a Lieutenant Colonel Dalton Fury, who was the head of the elite Delta Force at Tora Bora, where they had bin Laden pinned down. The Delta, in the book, and I'm only going off the book, in the book, the Delta Force knew that there was an escape route through this one mountain pass into Pakistan. They wanted to insert the Delta Force on the other side so that when bin Laden was drove out of there, they'd be waiting in ambush for him. It went right into the Oval Office and was vetoed by Cheney and Bush. They would not let and this is the guy that was running the op. It's right in his book. Now, how come that hasn't made the headlines of the mainstream media? That this operation was vetoed by the president and the VP. Now, why did they veto it? Did they want to leave an escape route? Or, here's another way to look at it. Remember how President Bush would say, well, I let the generals lead in the field. You know, I don't get involved in that. That's the military. Well, obviously not here. Who are these two to overrule an elite Delta Force commander in a combat op? One of them had Cheney, 5 deferments from Vietnam, never served in the military, and George Bush, who couldn't even make it to a year of National Guard meetings. And these guys are going to tell an elite Delta Force commander what will happen in an operation? Well, clearly politics entered in, didn't it? In some way, or money, or whatever it might be. But I was stunned and I just recently read this book. If you don't believe me, the book is called Kill Bin Laden. And the author is Dalton Fury, Lieutenant Colonel Dalton Fury. And he says that right in his book, that they were right in the Oval Office and were told they could not set up on the other side of this mountain pass because they knew that was the only escape route that they had him pinned down. And now we don't know. I personally think he's dead. I think he's been dead for a while. I think he's just the boogeyman that they want to keep out there, so we're all thinking that he's waiting behind the tree so that they can continue with what they're doing.
Yes, sir, we have this gentleman right there, Bob, behind you.
The guy that believes Oswald.
I do indeed, thank you. Hey,
Sure.
Did Roger Moe ever support a policy because it was smart, it was good government, or was he always the quintessential politician that played the partisan role?
I think he was pretty much the quintessential politician that played the partisan role because he was part of my last year in office. Did you know my last year in office, I became the most powerful man in America? I'll tell you why. Because my last year in office, I submitted the state budget, and the Democrats and Republicans got in bed together, threw my budget out, came up with their own budget, overruled both of my vetoes, and they're stuck with it today, and they did it for political reasons. They thought I was going to run again. And I fooled them. I didn't run, and they were left holding the bag. And that's where Roger Moe stood there with it. When they overruled my vetoes and the media was there, Roger Moe stood with his head down looking at the floor the whole time because he knew it was the wrong thing to do. He knew it. But instead, they went ahead anyway, and Minnesota's paying for it today because this budget was back in '02. Well, they've got a major deficit up there this year, and would the deficit be gone? No. But if they would have adopted my budget, I'm willing to bet it would be half of what it is today, what they're going to face. See, there's your ramifications of where they do something politically for an election as opposed to doing the right thing for the people. They will turn anything political. They don't care what happens to you. It's all about their parties and the power to them.
Yes, sir. Right there. You got it quick. Let's wait. Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
How did you know Roger Moe?
Geographically, this place is birth. I spent a greater part of my life in Minnesota. I was at the '87 World Series.
Okay.
Got a good view of Arkansas,
Okay. Just wondered how you would know the depth to be able to name somebody like that. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. It'd be easy for me to ask about Bret Hart and Monday Night Raw, but my question deals with Minnesota politics. You mentioned the 2002 budget. I've been following the situation involving the abduction of Drew Shadeen and the fact that Tim Pawlenty, in his administration, he released the guy who abducted her, and he's now been sentenced to the death penalty. In an interview, he said he blamed you for that, as far as saying that happened in your administration.
That what happened?
That the things were set into place for Alfonso Rodriguez's release from prison, early release. You know, he was the one that
had nothing to do with me.
Okay, I saw that on MSNBC, but I just want to get your comments and to see if that might be a Willie Horton type issue for Pawlenty if he pursues the presidency.
I don't know, but he actually blamed me for it.
I saw it on MSNBC.
Oh boy, because he's always thanking me because I never talk about him at all because I don't believe it's a proper thing to do. I don't believe that when you leave the governorship that your job is to then sit back and criticize who follows you. I don't do that. I don't talk about it, and not because the people elected that person. It's none of my business. So I'm stunned that he would turn so political and try to. Well, then again, he may be trying to go for president, so all for broke. And you know what I find laughable about that? If I would have sought a second term, he'd be gone. He even admitted to me he could never beat me. I would have been reelected again. I had to laugh. I had the highest approval ratings of 73 at one point in time, but I knew that was false because as soon as you make hard decisions, you're going to start dropping. But the lowest I was 45. And I remember the media saying, oh my God, Governor Ventura, you've fallen to 45%, da-da-da-da-da-da. And I looked at the media and said, wait a minute, you're used to a two-person race. I said, I won with 37%. If I'm at 45, that means I'm up 8. How can you say I'm down? When I won it was 37 to 34 to 28. So if I'm now up at 45 in a three-man race, that's a landslide because that means the other two are split in 55 if I'm at 45. So you know how to sell the media, they don't see things the way they should. In I was up 8 because I won with 37, I'm at 45.
Yes, sir, right here.
Thank you, Governor. Tell us about HARP, and in your opinion,
HARP?
is it still active?
Oh, of course. HARP was what we did on the show, the first show. It was based on a book by a Dr. Nick Begich, and the title of the book is Angels Don't Play This Harp. In a nutshell, it's up in Gakona, Alaska, about 4 hours from Anchorage. They call it a unclassified research center, but they're lying, because if it was unclassified, I could get in. So clearly it is classified. They wouldn't let me in. This is a thing that of 180 radio antennas that are all pumping 50,000 watts of low-frequency sound into the ionosphere, which is that highest layer, and then they ricochet back to Earth, and it heats it up. Anybody think this may contribute to global warming? This massive thing they have up there. And the real, in a nutshell, yes, it's still operational. It can knock planes out of the air. They claim it can control the weather, which is illegal. They've signed treaties that that's not to be done. But then again, you know, we've signed a lot of treaties with the Native Americans too, and so what the hell. But, and also here's the big conspiracy theory on it. Remember the tsunami in Indonesia? There was no warning. There was no earthquake, there was nothing. The tsunami just happened, and apparently there were witnesses there that saw the northern lights prior to the tsunami. Well, that's a telltale sign of HARP. It is in use. And normally you can't see the northern lights in Indonesia. You know, you got to be up in Minnesota, you got to be up in Alaska, you got to be in a northern place to see the northern lights. And so that's the real mystery or the conspiracy theory of it. Like Alex on my show jumped on me, the forever cynic, and he said, Governor, you're trying to say that they would just kill these people for no reason at all? And I said, no, Alex, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, what if they were just testing it? And this ended up the result. What are they going to do? Come out and say, oops? Oops, we made a mistake. We'll be honest with you. But I mean, this thing clear, and and it's also funded to the tune of $300 million, I think, a year, or $300 million, and it's funded by DARPA. Anybody here know what DARPA is? DARPA is the most secretive part of the Pentagon. You can't know what they're doing. So I know, taking an educated guess, I kind of think this is more than just an unclassified research center. Plus, it's on military property, the Air Force. I've been in the military. The military don't do nothing for humanitarian reasons. That's not their job. Their job is to wage war. Like it or not, that's what they do.